I think this is a canard. I think it's absolutely absurd.
So explain, though, this 501c6 order, you don't have to release it. The law says you do not have to disclose individual donations to this part of your organization.
Correct.
Why not disclose?
Well, the reason is pretty simple. We don't want to disclose for the same reason Mr. Gibbs, the president's, ironically, spokesperson, who ran attack ads against Howard Dean in the 03-04 cycle.
Okay.
Well,
that was that was a 527. They did release their donors.
No, they refused.
No, eventually
until
they had to.
After the election.
No, but the law.
After the election.
The law says they right. Well, because they filed their report.
Correct.
So they did eventually disclose.
Eventually.
Are you guys going to eventually disclose?
No, because of, and let me explain why. When we ran issue ads last year over the Patients Protection and Affordable Care Act, now law, we cited repeatedly testimony before the Senate Finance Committee from both CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, the official scorekeeper for Congress, and the Center for Medicare Services, that this law would not bend the cost curve down. It would bend the cost curve up. Somehow, some of the companies that contributed to that effort became public, and not by us. They were all greeted with protest at their corporate headquarters. They were, in some cases, threatened. They were repeatedly...
So your donors are afraid of a public backlash?
Absolutely. Just as George Soros was when he stopped giving to a group promoting Jewish-Palestinian relations. And he said openly, for fear that it would taint that organization.
So you believe we should not have any sort of disclosure law on campaign finance going forward?
I kind of adhere to the what I would consider the penultimate Supreme Court case, NAACP versus the state of Alabama back in 1953, where people were trying to force disclosure of who the wealthy white individuals were giving to that organization to promote integration. The Supreme Court ruled, in my view, correctly. There's only one reason people want that, and that's to intimidate and harass. If we look at Prop 8 2 years ago in California on the Gay Lesbian Marriage Initiative, an Institute for Justice did a study because the names of the supporters and financial contributors to Prop 8 were divulged on the internet. Their homes were vandalized, they were threatened, they were intimidated, and this is exactly what the allies outside of this town to some of the president's goals and objectives, like Move On and SEIU, do.
But you really believe that if we're getting to this point that the case for non-disclosure is basically for fear of retribution?
Well, look at Target Corporation in Minnesota. Here you have a company that gave to a ballot initiative, a state ballot initiative, to promote economic growth in the state, where they're headquartered, where their shoppers and employees are. This is a company, don't forget, that employs people that are independents, Democrats and Republicans, as shareholders of all political stripes, as customers of all political stripes, supporting something to promote economic growth. A gubernatorial candidate connected to that happened to have an opposing view.
Sure, and they supported
Target gets a boycott, and then there's attempts to essentially
isn't that the free market?
Well, but it's different. Corporations, as I said, have employees, vendors, suppliers, and shareholders of all political stripes. They're not trying to alienate anybody. They're looking for representative organizations, such as mine, and thousands of others, to be an express organization to advocate for them in their behalf.
I'll be honest, it's kind of a depressing outlook, that the fact that we think that being public about where you stand on an issue, you don't want to go public because of just fear of some sort of potentially negative retribution.
There is negative retribution. There's a history and track record of retribution here. And that's why we, the Chamber...
Politics ain't beanbag.
Well, of course it's not. But, I mean, the president didn't disclose his contributors in 08. SEIU said they could be accused of the same thing.
He disclosed all. I mean, in the FEC report, we saw all the contributors over $200.
Did you? Over $200.
Yes, that's the law. I mean, why not have some form of that?
Well, again, corporations, I think, sit in a very different space here than individuals. And I've given you about 5 examples.
No, I understand. It's an interesting argument. Okay. No, it's an interesting argument, and I'm fascinated by it.